This spring, our adult forum is taking a look at the essentials of the Christian faith in a series we're calling Getting to the Heart of Things. And we're taking a look at the essentials, at least, that are called attention to by our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, in the Small Catechism, where Luther tried his best to identify the parts of the Christian faith that he thought were essential for families to hand on to their children and that were a pretty core part of what it means to be a follower. That's not just head knowledge, but also heart belief as well as actions and practices with our hands. And the first place that Luther goes in the Small Catechism is to talk about the Ten Commandments, right? These sort of central pillars of a way of life that go back to ancient roots in the Bible, early in the second book of the Bible, the book of Exodus. But before we get to those 10 rules, those 10 commandments, it's worth just keeping very briefly in the back of our mind how they actually fall in the Bible, because separated from their context, it can feel like here's just 10 random rules that are how to either make God love you or earn something from God, or that if you don't follow them well enough, there'll be red marks on your permanent record. But in the context of the story of the book of Exodus, the commandments are part of a larger relationship between God and the people, a covenant relationship. And it's worth noting that covenant only comes as the second phase of a relationship that's already initiated when God saves the people and brought them out of slavery and through the Red Sea and all the stories of the plagues and the Passover, all that story. That comes first. In other words, the Christian story, the scripture story is never follow these rules first, and if you do a good enough job, then God will save you. But rather, it's always the other way around. God, who does the saving, is a free gift. And then from there says to the people who've been saved, who've been set free, here's how to live as freed people. Here's how to be in relationship with me. So even the commandments themselves begin with God identifying as, I'm the God who brought you out of Egypt. So I'm not just a random stranger. I'm not one of the Egyptian gods. I'm not an invisible force. I'm the same one who already saved you as a free gift, who already brought you out, who's already loved you and been in relationship with you. So commandments are always sort of a second step in a two-step dance. The other thing that's worth holding on to about that idea of covenant is one of the details we talked a little bit about in our session, about even the actual format of these big stone tablets. One of the things we discuss in our class is that the Bible is real clear on there. These 2 stone tablets that the commandments of the covenant are written on. And man, for the life of us, we've come up with all sorts of different explanations. Maybe the first 5 are on one and the second 5 are on the other. Or maybe the ones that have to do with God are on the one and then the ones that have to do with the neighbor are on our other. And I floated out an idea, widely known by a lot of scholars, that maybe you're not looking at 10 commandments split into 2 halves, but maybe what we've got is actually 2 identical copies of the same covenant for a purpose. I know it might sound weird. Why would they get 2 identical copies? So follow me for a quick second. In the ancient world, if you want to have a treaty, say with a neighboring nation or something like that, one country gets a copy of what the covenant is. Maybe it be, we'll provide military support and you'll give us, barrels of olive oil or jars of wheat or money or something like that. Whatever the covenant is, whatever the formal relation or alliance is, each country, country A and country B, gets a copy of the covenant. And they would usually, in the ancient world, like in the 1300s BC, would chisel these into stone, like big stone monuments. And one would be in the capital city of country A, and one would be in the capital city of country B. And everybody in both countries would know, we're in a relationship, we're in an alliance, or we're dependent on that more powerful country, and they provide us with support, and we are loyal to them in response, that kind of thing. The way the covenant between God and the people is laid out in the book of Exodus, it really feels like one of those ancient covenants between a powerful country and a neighboring, smaller, dependent country. And it sure makes it seem like what we've got is one of these copies of the covenant is the people's, that they're supposed to remember and hold on to, and the other is God's. But of course, here's the beautiful thing. God doesn't live somewhere else. They don't leave the stone copy for God up on Mount Sinai or somehow send it up to heaven. God's message to the people is, I'm going to be with you anyway. I'm going to be with you on the journey. So you're going to put your copy of the covenant in your little box, the Ark of the Covenant that you carry with you through your journeys in the wilderness. You know what? Go ahead and put my copy there too, because I'm going to be where you are. In other words, even the gift of the covenant commandments themselves, inscribed on tablets of stone, is meant to be a reminder that God's going with the people. that God's in relationship with them, and that God's going to be with them every step of the way on the journey. When you know that, when that is your way of hearing the commandments, it completely reframes the conversation, doesn't it? So that these aren't 10 random rules that have fallen down sort of out of nowhere. These are part of a relationship between God and the people. That's really key. The 10 Commandments are not just 10 abstract rules that are beamed down to earth for anybody. They're given in the book of Exodus as part of a relationship between God and the freed Israelites for how to be freed people. And then the other thing that we talked about in our class session is how all 10 of the big 10 commandments in the book of Exodus and then in the Catechism, all of them, even though they look and sound different, one's about no other gods, and one's about coveting, and one's about stealing, our older brother in the faith, Martin Luther, says they are really all about one thing: how to love, trust, and fear God above all things. That really all the commandments are variations on that central idea. How do I love, trust, and fear God above all things? And even that raises some questions, like, well, what's this fear business? Am I supposed to be afraid of God? And let's say at the outset, no, it's not about being afraid of God. Maybe we don't have a good word in English for that sort of awesome sense of being in the presence of something that is both holy and amazing and that leaves you dumbfounded and also maybe reminds you to watch where you step. When we talk about this part of the commandments with our confirmation kids, I'll often say, picture yourself standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon with your feet like right there up on the edge, right? It's an amazing, breathtaking view, and you might be at a loss for words to see all the beauty and the majesty and the grandeur and all those layers of colored rock and the amazing power of the water that carved that rock over all those eons. But you also want to watch your step, right? Like, don't be glib about where you step if you're standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon. I think that sense is what it means to fear God. Not a sense of I should be afraid that God's going to get me or God will zap me, but more this sense of I'm constantly standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon to be in God's presence. And all of us all the time are in the very presence of God. That on this little tiny blue planet where you and I live, in this vast, vast universe, God has chosen to be in relationship with you and me. That's mind-boggling. And that also kind of gives me a sense of both my smallness and fragility, and also a sense of God's just immense grandeur. I think that's what it means to fear and love and trust God. The other thing to say is, Martin Luther was one who would remind us, whatever we love and trust the most is our God, practically speaking, even if you don't recognize that it's a God, even if you don't have a little golden statue that you bow down to or pray to. Anything that we love and trust the most, we've turned into our God. And while maybe in earlier times in history, human beings were more likely to make statues or golden calves or things like that and bow down to them and call them gods or goddesses, we live in a time where, honestly, the idols are not gone away. They're just more insidious and subtle. We live in a time when it's really easy to trust in my bank account or my car or my degrees on my wall or my status or my social media or the algorithm and all the things it feeds me or the number of followers and friends I have on my Facebook page. There's a million other things that are competing for our allegiance and our love and our attention. So the gods haven't gone away. The lesser gods and idols are just more subtle about their business of trying to lure us away. Anything we love and trust and fear the most becomes our God. So we ended up saying that this commandment, instead of treating it like, oh, this one doesn't matter, this is an easy one, there aren't other gods that we're worried about worshiping, maybe is the one that's most important of all to hear no other gods, because there's a lot of other things that we are tempted to treat like gods. So, coming up this Sunday, we're going to delve further into the 10 Commandments, asking Martin Luther's recurring question, what does this mean? What is this? And how all of the commandments have to do with loving and trusting God above all else, and a life that's lived in light of that, knowing we're already in relationship with God, who saved us first, and now is teaching us how to be freed people. Join us for these conversations as we gather around the table on Sunday mornings at 9 o'clock here at Community of Christ. See you along the way as we get to the heart of things.